Okay, here is a quick tutorial on the FX3. I think the easiest way to get to your settings would actually be using the internal memory versus using any of the buttons. And the reason for that is on my camera, I have some of these buttons customized to be something else other than what it says. And I don't know if the camera you're going to be using is going to be using is already has the default set up on its buttons on the camera. So it's better just to use the internal menu to access everything. So if you hit the menu button, it's going to bring you to the main menu. So I just want to show you something really quick. So right now it brings up the main menu because I had it selected. But if you use the wheel right here, you can just hit the left wheel to toggle over. And this basically lets you go through all the sub menus. That's for the camera, that's for exposure, focus, etc., etc. And then you go to the top here, this has the star. That's where if you want to create your own menu, you can do that. Don't worry about that. But right underneath the star, it's going to be this little house. And that's where the two main menus are. That's where you want to be. So if for some reason you go hit menu button, you hit the menu button and it takes you here, just toggle all the way through, whether it's up or down, to get to the little house symbol, and then go right. So you can keep going right until you bring the menu, the full screen up for the menu. So from here you can access your frames per second, your shutter speed right there, your aperture for your lens is right there, and your base ISO. So this lets you know what your base ISO is. There's two for the FX3. The base ISO here is 800. On the A7S III, it's 640, but on the FX3, it's 800. And then the high base ISO is 12,800. I don't imagine you'd be using that for a indoor interview shot. Then you got your white balance you can access here, your S709, so that's basically the LUT. So if you wanted to turn the LUT on to see what the flat image looked like, then you can have that on, and it'll give you just a little more saturation, more contrast. The XAVCS, that lets you know what the format is that you're shooting. So that's 4K right there. You don't need to worry about this megabyte deal. The PX, that's proxies. You don't need to worry about that. I have mine on. You don't need to have yours on. And then you have the wind, this little symbol, that's wind protection. I never use that. And you should not encounter wind because you are going to be shooting inside. And then you got the volume adjustment for the camera right there. All right, so if you click on frames per second, you can change whether it's 24, 30, 60, or 120 frames. I know they're different numbers, but they just round up to mean 24, 30, 60. So whichever one you choose, 24 is how you shoot movies, 30 and 60, sometimes people will use that, or a lot of times people will use that for interviews or shooting sports. It gives you, it just eliminates that motion blur. The thing to remember is your shutter speed needs to be double whatever you choose. So if I do 30 frames per second, then that means my shutter here needs to be double that. So double 30 would be 1/60. So if I click on that, you'll bring up the screen so you can see it, and the shutter is highlighted there. All you do is use your wheel here, and you can just rotate it either left or right to lower it or raise it up. So since we were at 60 or 30 frames per second, then we would do 1/60, okay? Then you hit the menu to go back, same deal. If you end up shooting 60 frames per second, that means this needs to be 120. Rotate the wheel to get 120. There's no 120 on this camera. 125 is close enough, so that's what you would use, okay? The next thing is your aperture for your lens. So you click on that. You rotate the wheel for everything. So the aperture or the iris, that basically opens or closes the lens. The wider open you have the lens, this goes to 1.4. That means you're going to have a shallow depth of field. So if you are shooting someone's face and it's focused on their eyes, that means their eyes are going to be the most in focus part of their face. And when you get to their nose, it might start getting a little soft. Okay, so for an interview purpose, you might want to keep this around 2.8, or even, I would say anywhere between 2.8 to 4. Okay, when you have 2.8 to 4, that basically means their entire head is going to be in focus. So you're not worried about anything being in focus if they fidget or move forward or backwards a little bit. So I would say for interview purposes, keep it at 2.8 for your lens, or higher if you can. Just remember, the higher your iris goes, the darker the image gets. So you're going to have to compensate that with light. Okay. So we'll keep that at 2.8. Let's jump back to the menu here. Your base ISO, if you're shooting Cine EI, then you're going to have your base ISOs here. So it's set at 800. These other numbers, you can see what it would look like on a monitor if you wanted to mess with those. But even if I adjust the look on the monitor, you're still shooting at 800. Okay, if that makes sense. White balance, again, click on that. You can do a set here, whether you want to do a white balance on something. So let's say I'm shooting at the door right now. So if I go to option 1, and then I'll use the wheel to toggle over here to set it, press the center of this little wheel, and you'll see this box. So I'm basically saying I want to use this door as my white balance. So then if I click it, typically it would give me my white balance. If you see a green screen, that means there's not enough light for it to do what it needs to do. So let's back out of that just to show you that it does work. And I'm going to raise my ISO. I'm actually going to go to the high ISO on this one. All right, so now if I went here, white balance, I want to do a preset, press this button here to go to set, hit the center button, I get the box, hit the center button again, and now, because I have enough light, it'll register that as my white balance. Okay, that's if you wanted to do that. You're probably just going to do your white balance here where it says K. So that means you do everything manually. So you go to the K symbol and you can rotate the wheel to adjust your white balance, whether you want cooler or warmer. If you're indoors, typically anywhere from 3200 to 30 or 4200 is a nice safe bet. You kind of got to judge where you're at to see if you can adjust, if you need to make adjustments. I mean, you're totally fine using your eye as long as you got the talent there in front of you. You can just kind of see how their skin tone looks when they're in front of the camera. So I'll just leave it here at like 3600 for now. And then you hit the center button just to lock it in. Okay, so that's basically you setting the white balance yourself. So that's probably the way you're going to do that. What else do you need? So the format you're going to be shooting in. So if you click this gives you all the flavors of 4K and HD. If they're just looking for HD, you would just click that, and now you're shooting HD. If they want 4K, I would click on that one. So you have this other version of 4K up at the top. I typically don't use that one because that sometimes people can have issues editing that format on their computer. So I would say stick with this one, XAVCS 4K, or if they're looking for HD, then that one. So that's probably where you're going to live. The 4K, the second one that says 4K, or the HD that's below it. These other formats, they actually use up more memory, but I don't use those because you don't see a big improvement in quality using those. And DCI, you would need a special card to do the DCI. So chances are you're just going to keep it on that for the 4K. You can change the bit rate if you want here. I would say just make sure this one's already set to the high one that says 10-bit versus 8-bit. 10-bit means they're getting more color information, and the editor will appreciate that. So when you select your 4K, just make sure you get the 10-bit option there. If it says 8-bit, click on it and select the 10-bit. And then the only other thing I would say you would mess with on here is the sound. So if you got a boom mic coming into here and you had it actually plugged into the camera, then you can adjust the sound here, okay? Just be mindful with the audio. You don't want the audio levels to get, too far. I would say the sweet spot's like -16, -12 dB. That's comfortable because then you can adjust things, especially if someone speaks louder, then it doesn't clip. But that's if you were going to plug the microphone directly into the camera. So right here on the FX3, there's a bunch of compartments. If you open it up, the top one is red. That's where you would stick a microphone, if they have a microphone that uses the skinny cord. But I'm assuming they may have a more professional microphone, so you wouldn't necessarily use this deal here. So I'm just going to bring this all the way back down. And you can either hit the OK to go back or the menu to go back, just like that. The LUT, this is just if you want to turn the LUT on or off. So I'm going to shut it off right now, and then we'll go to the image. So it might be a little hard to see on here, but the image is flat. So that's showing you the flat image. And then if I go back to the menu and turn it off, it might be hard to see on the screen, but now there's more contrast. I don't know if you can see with that box there. There's more contrast, more color. So it just gives you an idea of what it would look like when it's color graded. But regardless of you having this LUT on, it's not baking that into the footage. You're still getting the raw or the log footage. All right, so now let's go over to the second menu here. So that was main. Main one's going to have more your basic settings. Okay, so that is where you would adjust your ISOs, whether it's 12,800 or the 800 base ISO. I'm going to back out of this. We'll do cancel, and I got a button for my ISO, so that's basically the low base ISO right there. Okay, let's go back to the menu. So that first menu, that's where you access the main settings of recording. And then if you tap here to go to your main 2, then this is where you get some other options. So the Cine EI, this is basically where you would do your log shooting. So if we click on that, you have a couple different options here. Cine EI is probably the easiest one to mess with here. If I shoot off, then that means I'm not shooting log anymore. I can do a different picture profile. So let's go back. Let's say they don't want log. So I shut that off, go back, and in the other main camera or main deal, this now changes to picture profile. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Where is it? Picture profile, picture profile. Right there. So these are the picture profiles. Like let's say they just want to shoot something that looks good right out of the camera without much editing. There's a bunch of different ones that you can choose here. And when you click on it, you can hit the little wheel or hit this arrow and it tells you exactly what the hell it is. So it's Rec 709. This one is a version of Cine, which is not a lot. It's not super flat, but it just gives you a little bit of flexibility in case they want to edit. So that gives you an idea of the picture profiles if they weren't shooting log. But I would think they would shoot log. So let's go back to this deal. So if you have log shooting off, then you would access all those picture profiles from the main 2 menu. But if you shoot Cine EI, it will automatically put it on S-Log3, and you just want to make sure this is the top one, which it should already default to that, but you just get better color with that setting. Okay, let's go back. You don't need to mess with embed LUT. And then the other things here, so this is where you could format, or this is where you tell the camera which slot you're going to use. So this camera has 2 different slots. So if you have the SD card going in slot 1, you want to make sure you're telling the camera, I want to do slot 1. If you have the SD card in slot 1 and this is clicked on slot 2, then the camera is going to think, hey, there's nothing here. It's empty. I can't record anything. But that's because you chose the wrong slot. So now if I go back to slot 1, now it lets me know I have 1 hour and 2 minutes left to film on the card. So just keep that in mind. You also have the option, if you had a card in each slot, to where it could record into both of them. Okay. So let's go back here. Your autofocus, this is where you could turn the autofocus on and off. So right now it's on continuous autofocus. So if I put my hand there, it should focus on my hand. It might not because I'm pretty close. Let me bump the ISO. Let me stand in front of it. It's a little bit slow. There we go. So my focus settings are probably slow. I think that's why I did that. And we'll go away from that. And if you're using manual focus lens, you go to manual focus, and now it says manual focus. So now the only way it would focus is if you use your lens. Okay. Let's assume you're doing autofocus lens. So put on autofocus and the camera does its thing. This right here, this is just the image stabilization. If you're going to have it on sticks, you don't need to have this on, but if it's on, it doesn't matter. I would just leave it on. But that basically adjusts for any micro jitters. If you were holding the camera handheld, you would want this turned on, because then it makes it, even if you shake a little bit, it keeps the shot steady. Okay, so you can either leave this on to standard or leave it on off. You don't need to put it on active. When you put it on active, it makes the image even more stable, but in order for it to do that, it actually crops in on the image, so it zooms in a little bit. And then if you shake, the sensor like compensates for it, so it looks like it's totally still. You won't need that, so either standard or off. Let's go back here. This lets you know that you have autofocus for eyes turned on. Oh, let's go back to this. This is a little fishy. There we go. So this just means it's going to focus on eyes, which is what you want for a interview. And then this lets you know if it's focusing on people, birds, or whatever. For the FX3, you only got 2 options, human or animal. So if you were shooting dogs, this would recognize a dog eyeball. But then if a human came into frame, it wouldn't recognize the human because you have it set to animal. So you want to make sure that's set to the little picture. If I hit animal, it's like a cat. So you want to make sure that's set. So this is basically how you would have it set to shoot the interview. You're shooting in log. That's letting you know it's recording to slot 1. If the card's in slot 1, you can have that off or have it on standard. Autofocus means it's going to use the autofocus if you're using autofocus lenses. AF on means it's going to focus on eyes. So you'll see a little box around someone's eye when they're in front of the camera, and that lets you know you're focusing on people. Going back to this screen, this is, like I said, the settings for the camera itself. Now, let's talk about the audio with the top handle. So this is, let me move this camera out of the way. We'll move it back a little bit. And let's get this in focus. All right, so this is the top handle. So if they have one of these deals, then this is what your microphone would be plugged into. So the bottom of this has a little cap. It may or may not have it. If they're using this, if you see this black thing, you want to slide it off because you want to be able to see the metal connectors there. Let me show you there. And let me turn my autofocus on so you can see. So that little metal connector. Okay. So if you got this little cap on, take it off. And this is going to get plugged in rotate the camera here. Hopefully you can see. The top here is the hot shoe. Now, I don't use that, but this same thing, this has a little cap on it. You want to pull that off so you can expose it, okay? And then the top handle just slides in just like that. And then you'll have some screws here that you can press into the FX3 to tighten it. You want to make sure it's tightened, okay, so it's firm, so it's not going anywhere. And now it's connected to the camera. Now for the audio on this, let's actually go to the camera setting, and you're going to click on audio recording right there. And you want to go to where it says NI shoe audio set. You just want to make sure it's on. It looks like it's on, and it's saying it's on the 2 channel there. It's probably better just to keep it on the top one. So let's go back to that again. Let's bring this a little bit closer so you can see. Get this info. There we go. So it's probably good just to keep it on the top one, because then that means you're getting 4 channels of audio if you want to use it. Okay. The 2 channel works fine too, but that's you probably get the better quality with that top one. So I'll just make sure it stays there, and then just make sure that it is on, which it's on. I believe it only comes on when it recognizes this. So I think if this was off, this would be grayed out, kind of like where it says wind noise reduction, how that's grayed out, because it's not applicable. So I think once when you connect this, that becomes that gets turned on. All right. So I'm going to unscrew this though, just to show you the top handle and the settings on the top handle. So we'll take this off, move the camera there. All right, so here is the top handle. So on one side you have three inputs, input 1 and 2. These are the XLRs, and you can also take the 1/4 inch jack to go in the middle there if they got a microphone like that. I'm assuming they have XLRs cables going to their mic if they're using a professional mic, so then that would get plugged into either input 1 or input 2. And then you also have this deal here, input 3. So this lets you put another microphone with a smaller connection in there. So it's kind of like the same connection that's on the camera body itself if you're using the little mic, okay? And then the back here, there's a little window. This lets the unit know which input you're using. So right here, the top one, it says input 3. So that would be the little mic if you have it plugged into there. Or you have the middle setting is input 1 and 2. So that would be if you let's say they're using 2 mics and they got a mic going here and here, then it would record both microphones. But with that, it's going to record, say, microphone 1 will be on the left channel, and then microphone 2 would be on the right channel, okay? Or you go to the last one, let's say you're just using 1 microphone, then you want to just stick it in the input 1 and click this button down to input 1. Let's see if we'll show. There you go. Okay, so there's a little button here that just moves up and down. That's input 3, input 1 and 2, or you're just going to use input 1. Then you'd use input 1 right there. And then the side right here, this gives you your adjustments for the microphone. So there's auto settings here. I wouldn't mess with the auto settings. So always make it manual. And they're just little knobs. It's just analog. So I'll just make sure it's manual. So let's say you're using 1 microphone. You want to plug it into that input 1. You want to make sure you're selecting input 1 here, which is going to be the bottom one. And then all you're messing with is the input 1 right here. So now you can adjust the volume of the mic on here instead of messing with it on the camera itself. Okay? So this overrides whatever's on the camera. If you remember, the camera menu had a setting for microphones, the volume, but that only applies if you're plugging a microphone directly into the side of the camera. So you set your volume here, and then there's a button over here at the top. It says line, mic, and then mic 48 volts. So the top one says line. That only means, let's say you wanted to hook this up to a soundboard, and you're not attaching a microphone, but you want the soundboard to record the audio, then you would have it set there. You're going to be using a mic, so you either want to have it on the first setting here that says mic. You want to make sure it's lined up there. And that's good if, let's say they got a microphone that is battery powered. Runs on its own power, it doesn't need any more juice. If they have a microphone that needs phantom power, so that means the camera is going to power the microphone, then you want to click it to the bottom one which says mic plus 40 volts. So that means once you do that, you plug in the mic and the mic's going to power up automatically. Okay. If the microphone has a battery itself, then you would just keep it on the first setting that says mic, and you just got to make sure the mic's turned on, because there'll probably be a switch to turn it on. Over here you have it's called attenuation. That's basically the volume of the mic. You would only really adjust this if you're recording something that's loud. So if you're let's say you're recording a concert and the concert's really loud, then you want to dump this down to 20 dBs. That means it's lowering the volume, the hotness of the mic by 20 decibels. Since you're going to do an interview, you want to get the highest signal possible from the microphone, so you just leave it or make sure it's at 0. Okay. If for some reason your microphone sounds low, I would double check to make sure it's not too low here, because this goes from 0 all the way up to 10. So I would make sure this is set correctly. And if it's still low, maybe this is all the way down to 20 dBs. So that's going to lower the gain of the microphone. So just push it up to get the full volume. And then the last thing, probably the most important thing, is the on-off button. So there's a button that says off and on. So you want to make sure this is on, or otherwise it's not going to operate. Even though you have it connected to the camera, that just means it's connected to the camera and the camera recognizes it, but it's not going to operate unless you have it turned on. So slide it to on and off when you're finished with it. But that is basically the top handle, if they are using the top handle as the mic. And if they aren't, I'll show you one more time. The side camera here, this has these ports that you open up. So you got an HDMI cable. This is what you would attach a monitor with, if they got a monitor you can look at. Or you open up, see if you can see that, this other compartment. You have a headphone jack, and then the top one that's red, that's where a microphone would get plugged in if they're using a microphone that way. So it just depends how they're using the microphone. But that is basically it. Again, the main settings you're going to look to operate would be in the menu 1 and menu 2 buttons. So we'll go and cycle over here. And remember, you want to go all the way up to the top, right underneath the star. You're going to see the house. That's what the one you want. And then go over to the right, and now you have access. Go click over again. Now you have access to main menu 1 and main menu 2. This is where you want to live. This is where you adjust all the settings. Okay? One more thing that you might want to mess with. Try to get this camera a little bit closer. See if we can get this in focus too. Now on my camera, I have this with its own setting. So for the autofocus, you have different settings for your autofocus. I have mine assigned to buttons here. So I got shift sensitivity, and then I have autofocus speed. They probably aren't going to have those assigned to buttons, so you just want to go to your autofocus menu. That's going to be AF, MF, and it'll be the first one. So the first top menu, and then you go over here to the right. So you have autofocus speed and subject sensitivity. So just so you know what those mean, The transition speed, that's basically how fast the camera is going to focus from one subject to another. So if I go all the way to 1, that means if I had something up close and then focused on something further away, it's going to focus very slowly. If I have this fast, then that means it's going to focus on something. Let's say if I had it focusing on my hand and then focused on the door, it would do it very quickly. If you're doing a sit-down interview, you don't need it to be super high. I'd probably keep it around 3 or 4, something like that. That comes in handy just in case the subject is like fidgeting around a little bit. So that's the transition speed, how fast it focuses. Then you got sensitivity. So this is how sticky the autofocus is. So you have all the way down to 1, which means it's locked on, and responsive is at 5. The only reason you would have it up high is if you need, let's say you have multiple people in a scene and you need to focus on one person and then turn the camera and immediately focus on someone else. You want it to be quick when it does that. Otherwise, you want it to be sticky. If you're just shooting one person, like a sit-down interview, you want it to kind of stick on that person. So right now, if I had someone in front of the camera, and that's the person I'm interviewing, someone could walk in front of the camera and the camera wouldn't respond because it wants to stick to the person you have it on, okay? So this could be anywhere from 1, 2 to 3. Any one of those numbers is where you want it for a sit-down interview. But you'll have to access that through the menu, the side part, and go to AF/MF menu, okay? And that would be transition speed, how fast it focuses, and sensitivity, how locked on it is to the subject. And that's basically it. That's all you really need to know to operate the camera. I guess let me show you one more thing here with the autofocus, the formatting of the card. So let's turn this way. All right. So on the FX3, I'm actually just going to shut this off. So on the FX3, you slide this button down and then push it back and it pops open. You've got 2 card slots. You got one at the top, one at the bottom. Press it in to get the card out. For these cards, they actually go in with the bottom facing you. And if you try to push it in this way, it won't go. It'll be like, so that lets you know it's going in the wrong way. So you got to turn it around so the circuit boards are facing you, and that would go in. So this is what I was talking about. This is slot 1. This is slot 2. If you have the card in slot 1, but you have slot 2 selected on the camera, then it's not going to record because there's nothing in there. Okay? So let's close that. And now let's turn this back on. Let me show you, just in case you need to format the card. I'll show you how to do that really quick. So you go to the menu. And let's see if I can get this a little bit closer so you can see. There you go. Okay, there we go. And this is kind of bright. All right, so if you're going to get this a little clearer for you. There we go. All right, so if you need to format it, you'd hit the menu button. And this, I don't think this is in the menu, the main menu. Let's see here. I don't think this gives you the option to format. No, it doesn't. All right, so for this, you want to go to all the way to the edge, the sub-menus here, and you want to go to the camera menu, okay? Then once you go to the camera menu, use the wheel to go over here. You have image quality record. You don't need to mess with that. Go to media, and then at the top you're going to see format. So you just use the wheel, go over to format. It'll highlight. You click the wheel, the right side of the wheel again, and now it's going to say select the media. Which one do you want to format? So I have it in slot 2. or excuse me, I have it in slot 1 because that one's orange. The slot 2 is grayed out, so it knows there's no card in there. So if that's the card I want to format, then I would just hit the center button and it would format the card, but that basically erases the card. So be careful not to format that unless you know you actually want to do that, okay? Because it just deletes the entire card so you're working fresh. I'm not going to mess with that because I have footage on there, but that's how you would format it. So we'll go back out. Let's go back into it again. So remember, the format is on the camera menu, then scoot over to media, and then format, and then hit the center button of the wheel, and that would format it. But that is basically it. Now you are a master of the FX3.